Good morning. We Americans believe things that are not true, and the things that we believe that are true, which are actually false, these are dangerous. We believe that our military is the most advanced and most technologically superior fighting force in the whole world, but it is not. Our weapons systems, our entire military-industrial complex, they're being exposed every day on the battlefields of Ukraine. Our weapons don't work. We spend $1 trillion a year on defense, and our weapons don't work. The Excalibur is an artillery system, which is a precision-guided munition that works with GPS satellites. In the beginning, they were great. It was on all the news, the videos of our artillery shells being used to blow up Russian tank columns. Then, suddenly, these systems didn't work anymore. In less than a month, the Russians adapted. They got their scientists and engineers to work. Remember, by the way, Russia has more STEM graduates every year than America does. The Russians deployed electronic warfare to interfere with our GPS. Soon the artillery shells would go in the wrong direction, or not blow up at all, or both. Now the entire system is useless, and Ukraine doesn't even use it. Other weapons platforms are having the same problems. We boast that our weapons are technologically superior, but the Russian countermeasures render them useless. Our HIMARS systems aren't working anymore. There's a new system developed by Boeing and Saab for small diameter bombs, and now that system needs to be overhauled because the Russians figured out how to beat it too. We do have some platforms still in operation, some of the ballistic and cruise missiles, but officials in the Ukraine and in NATO believe that the Russians are going to be knocking those out too. Western training and fighting doctrine is that precision is better than mass. Being able to hit targets with high degrees of accuracy can defeat larger forces, numerically superior forces. But that has never really been tested before, and certainly never really tested against a peer country, which is a world-class military force. What may have worked against Iraq or the Taliban or ISIS doesn't mean anything up against a Russia or a China. Don't know why they listed the Taliban at all. The Taliban are still running things in Afghanistan after 20 years of our trying to get rid of them. But here's a Lieutenant General, former CO of U.S. Army Europe. We've been making some bad assumptions because we were using precision weapons against people who couldn't do anything about it. Now, however, we are up against a peer opponent who actually can do something about it. The U.S. Undersecretary of Defense admits that the Russians have gotten very good at disrupting precision munitions. Russia is on offense, too, constantly improving their own missile systems, and our Ukrainian allies say that Western weapons manufacturers can't keep up with the changes on the battlefield there. The technology is changing so fast that Ukrainian-built weapons that worked a few months ago no longer do, so they need to continually update them. But when Ukraine gets weapons from the West, our manufacturers have software that they haven't changed for years, and nobody wants to change the software, and so the weapons we send them are useless as soon as Ukrainian forces open the box. In answer to these concerns, our defense officials say, don't worry, we're not giving Ukraine our best technology, and things will go a lot differently if it's our troops that are going to be in harm's way instead of Ukrainian troops. Ukrainian troops, by comparison, probably are not as well trained as our guys are. We might imagine how this sounds to people who are on the ground in Ukraine. The Ukrainians, along with Western military experts, are baffled, angry, dismayed when they hear U.S. military officials and our defense companies say that there is no problem here. The U.S. military is learning things that are not necessarily true. We pretend that our own military forces would do better than the Ukrainian army, or that the problems that we're seeing there in Ukraine would be easily overcome. In other words, we are greatly overestimating our own capabilities and greatly underestimating everybody else's. Remember, our entire military doctrine is based on being able to hit with precision important targets, but we can't. The Russians have figured out how to jam our precision weapons and how to jam or spoof our satellite systems. Even the Houthis in Yemen have figured out how to do it somehow. And as Americans, we miss the plot because everything is reduced to a political problem instead of a technological one, or a military one, or an economic one. Look at how badly Joe Biden bungled the Afghanistan withdrawal, how many weapons he left behind. That's what Republicans say. Instead of, how did we lose Afghanistan at all? We controlled the airspace. We had cruise missiles and stealth bombers in the air. We had Navy SEALs and Marines and U.S. Special Forces on the ground, and we lost anyway. In Ukraine, same thing. A bunch of Republicans start asking questions about how much longer the war may drag on and say this is starting to get pretty expensive. And the Democrats argue with them and accuse them of being stooges for the Kremlin, for slowing down another $50 billion. Instead, why isn't anyone asking why our wonder weapons don't work 2 weeks after the Russians see them in operation? 2 weeks is all it takes for them to figure out how to make our bombs fly off in the wrong direction. Our artillery systems, our cruise missiles, our HIMARS, our drones. And if Russia can do all these things that we do know about, what can the Chinese do which we don't know about? Isn't that the great unknown unknown? Last week we shared a presentation that showed how many of our missile systems need Chinese semiconductors to work properly. Could that be a factor? Does anyone know? Is anyone trying to find out? Our top generals and defense officials are finally admitting that lots of things which we thought we knew turned out to be untrue. We have made some bad assumptions. What may be some good assumptions? What are some things that we strongly need to consider now in light of failures across the Middle East and in Yemen and in Ukraine? For example, may we ask, what if China and Russia are not actually peers at all? What if it's they who are far ahead? What does it mean when their fighting doctrine, China's and Russia's, is to employ precision and mass, overwhelming superiority in troops and material and ordnance and strike power and logistics, and in addition to overwhelming technological superiority? We lost Afghanistan, even though the Taliban did not have an electric warfare capability, or munitions factories, or a semiconductor industry, or satellite systems, or space program. Russia and China do have all those things. Combined, they have 4 times our population and 8 times as many STEM engineers and graduates than we've got. So we need to formulate some new assumptions with those things in mind. And we need to be quick about it. This is Tiger Leaping Gorge in Huinam Province. Be good.